New Year's Eve. My own son leaned across the kitchen island, eyes sharp, voice casual but cruel. You probably won't remember any of this in 6 months anyway. I laughed politely, pretended not to hear the blade inside the sentence. By February 14th, I had lost my home, my yacht, and $18.3 million. Hello. My name is Dr. Charles Whitmore, 72 years old, retired cardiac surgeon, widower. They thought I was slipping. They thought their scheme was airtight. And for a while, I did too. If you've ever been blindsided by family greed, drop your city in the comments. Because this story, you're not going to believe how far they went, and how far I went to take it all back. Subscribe if you've ever been underestimated, because the twist in this story, it hits harder than a courtroom verdict. Let me take you back. When my wife Ellen passed last fall, after a long battle with pancreatic cancer, something in me unraveled. 50 years together, half a century. The silence left behind wasn't just quiet. It was deafening. We had built a life together, not flashy, but solid. Our estate in Lake Oswego was a modest $5 million by today's insane standards. Add in the 80-foot yacht I kept in Newport, the vintage Porsche in the garage, and a carefully balanced portfolio of Tesla, Berkshire, and a bit of crypto I never fully trusted. I wasn't just retired. I was secure. My son Mark knew that. His wife Lisa definitely knew that. And I wanted to believe they cared more about me than my net worth. Looking back now, I see the pattern. The night of Ellen's funeral. Mark left early. He had a client dinner. Lisa posted a selfie from the wake, captioned, "Celebrating a life well lived. Rest easy. Queen Hanch. Blessed Hash Heaven. Gained an angel." I tried not to take it personally. I told myself they were just coping differently. That's what I did for most of my life. See? Mark was the golden child. Private school, travel soccer, a BMW at 17, even when he flunked out of NYU's business program. I paid for his rebrand, some vague startup idea, then a wellness coaching license. Meanwhile, I packed tuna sandwiches in Ziplocs for 35 years at the hospital. Missed Christmas 3 times in a row because the ICU was short-staffed. Took every bonus and rolled it into index funds. No yachts until after retirement. No luxury until after the work was done. I sacrificed quietly, willingly, because I thought family was worth it. Ellen agreed. She said Mark just needed more time to grow into himself. But what I didn't see, what I couldn't admit, was that while I was busy protecting our future, they were already carving it up behind my back. The first red flag, I ignored it. Mark offered to help organize my finances while I was handling the estate stuff. He was polite, warm, said I should focus on healing. I remember the day he came by with Lisa and a red leather folder. Inside a stack of documents I was too tired to read. Just basics, he said. Power of attorney updates, mail forwarding stuff, inheritance splits. You don't need to worry. I signed. God help me, I signed. And the moment the pen left the page, the countdown began. But I'll explain that in a second. First, I want you to remember this in every betrayal. There's a moment when you doubt yourself before you doubt them. And that moment, that's the crack where all the damage begins. I was a heart surgeon for 41 years. I knew how to read blood pressure, pulse irregularities, and stress rhythms like a second language. But when it came to reading my own son's intentions, I was blind. Coming up, I'll tell you what tipped me off. A single email, one strange bank alert, and the sound of Lisa's voice on a muted Zoom call. It was all I needed to know the truth. They weren't helping me grieve. They were helping themselves to everything. After Ellen passed, I did what a lot of old men do when grief sneaks up on them. I got quiet. I kept to routines. I watered the garden even when it rained. I filled her side of the bed with neatly folded quilts, just so the absence didn't feel so loud. But underneath that routine was exhaustion, not just from losing her, but from holding everything together for so long. You see, I was never the emotional one. Ellen handled the birthdays, the check-in calls, the subtle glue that made us feel like a family. I handled the rest, the hard, boring stuff. Medical bills, property taxes, portfolio rebalancing, fixing the roof every time winter ripped shingles off. We had an agreement, and it worked until I was left to do both parts alone. That's when Mark stepped in, like a dutiful son. At first, I was relieved. He started showing up more. He brought over dinner once a week, usually takeout. But still. Lisa even cleaned out Ellen's side of the closet one afternoon while I napped. It's what she would have wanted, she said. I nodded. But inside, it felt too fast. Still, I was grateful. I told myself maybe this was finally our moment, me and Mark building the bond that never quite took root when he was younger. Looking back now, I can't believe how blind I was. Mark always had charm. He knew how to smile through failure, how to make excuses sound like ambition. At 16, he crashed my Porsche and said he was just testing its limits. At 25, he left grad school mid-semester and claimed he'd outgrown academia. I paid every bill anyway, just like my father never did for me. Meanwhile, I was the one who missed holidays because a patient coded on Christmas Eve. I was the one who took double shifts during flu season, slept 2 hours, then showed up to judge a science fair because Mark's teacher said parental support wasn't optional. Even in my retirement, I couldn't stop working. Not because I had to. God knows the accounts were solid. But because I didn't know how to be idle, I thought rest was indulgence. Mark thought rest was a birthright. There's this lie older parents tell themselves, that if we give enough, sacrifice enough, love enough, they'll see it. They'll understand what we gave up, what we carried. But some kids don't see it that way. Some just assume it was all owed to them in the first place. And Mark, he made that assumption years ago. The first holiday without Ellen was Thanksgiving. I set the table for 3 me, Mark, and Lisa. I even tried making her cranberry sauce recipe, the one with orange zest and clove. They arrived an hour late. Lisa brought vegan cupcakes that stayed in their container the entire night. Mark brought a bottle of white wine that he left in the car. They barely touched the food. Mark spent most of the meal checking crypto charts on his phone. Lisa scrolled Instagram, live commenting on someone's healing retreat. At one point, I offered to carve the turkey, and Mark said, "You should really think about getting a meal service. This stuff looks like it took way too much effort." That was the first time I felt the burn. Not anger, something colder, something closer to realization. A few days later, he came by with that red leather folder. "Let's get things streamlined," he said. "You've got too much going on for one person to manage. Let me take some of it off your plate." And I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe he was stepping up because he loved me, not because he saw an opportunity. But by then, I was already tired. Not physically, emotionally. Tired of explaining the same tax logic I drilled into him when he was 19. Tired of smiling through disappointment. So when he said, "Just sign here, and I'll take care of the details," I did. That's how the door opened. One little signature, a single act of trust that would cost me more than I could imagine. And I wouldn't realize how deep the betrayal ran until the day the yacht club called, asking why I was selling Blue Velocity. The yacht I hadn't even touched since Ellen died. The yacht that wasn't listed until Mark made it so. But we'll get to that in a second. Next came the first withdrawal, then the gas bill, then the voice I'll never forget Lisa's on a Zoom call I wasn't supposed to hear. "He's slipping. Give it 3 more months, and he won't even know what year it is." I knew then this wasn't miscommunication. It wasn't a mistake. It was a plan, and they'd been laying it out for months, maybe longer. It started small, like it always does. A $700 wire transfer to something called Firebird Ventures, LLC. I hadn't authorized it. I hadn't even heard of it. I checked my Fidelity app twice, then called Mark. Oh, that. It's just a reallocation. Don't worry. Dad, I'm shifting a few things into safer vehicles. You've got exposure in some volatile sectors. That sounded impressive. Too impressive. Maybe. But I nodded anyway. Because I was tired. Because he sounded confident. Because it's easier to believe someone loves you than to admit they're managing your decline. I let it go. But the second breadcrumb dropped 2 weeks later. Gas company called. Said my autopay had failed. Odd, I'd never missed a utility payment in my life. I opened the account. My name was gone. Everything had been transferred to L. Whitmore. Lisa. Same thing with the electric. Same thing with my car insurance. It felt like waking up in someone else's life. One where I still lived in the house, but on paper, I didn't exist. Then came the Zoom call. I was walking down the hall to grab my reading glasses when I heard Lisa's voice from the den. He's getting worse every week. I've already booked the house stager. Once the judge approves the cognitive report, we'll list it. Then silence. Then a laugh, hers. Honestly, we're being kind. He doesn't even realize how far gone he is. I stopped in the hallway like someone had hit me in the chest. They were staging my house for sale. I backed away before they saw me, sat on the edge of my bed, and tried to breathe. That was the moment it all clicked. The weird documents, the folder, the red pen that didn't match mine, the sudden kindness that came wrapped in subtle condescension. I went straight to my safe. Inside original POI papers, Ellen and I signed back in 2012. They granted Mark limited access only for emergencies. Behind that file, tucked in a manila envelope I hadn't noticed before, was another set, stamped, notarized, dated April 2nd, just 2 weeks after my minor stroke scare last year. The signature looked like mine, but it wasn't mine. Different pressure. The loop in the H was wrong. It was the kind of mistake only someone who'd seen my signature often, but never practiced, it would make. The next morning, I went to the notary listed on the document. He worked out of a UPS store, told me yes. He remembered the signing. You were with your son. You seemed confused. Honestly. He said it was just routine paperwork. You signed real quick. Confused. I hadn't stepped foot in that store in over a year. That's when I knew this wasn't just manipulation. This was fraud. I hired a private investigator that afternoon, a former Navy man named Calvin. Quiet, meticulous. I gave him everything account access, utility logs, even my Ring doorbell footage. He didn't say much, But a week later, he came back with a printed report and one simple sentence. "Sir, they've been siphoning money for 14 months. I flipped through the pages. $11,200 to Lisa's business coaching brand. $29,000 in crypto buys through shady offshore wallets. A $41,000 home repair line item for a kitchen remodel in their house. All routed through my accounts. Every withdrawal logged. Every dollar disguised. And every step hidden behind that fraudulent POA." Then came the worst page, the summary. $243, $780 siphoned. And that was just what we could track. I remember staring at that number for so long, my vision blurred. Not because of the money, but because of what it meant. I had trained my hands to restart hearts. I had held crying families while their loved ones slipped away. I had made every sacrifice I could imagine, and my own son looked at that life and saw opportunity. That night, I sat in the kitchen, lights off, rain tapping the window. I didn't feel rage. Not yet. What I felt was cold clarity, like the part of me that had wanted to believe in Mark finally let go. I reached into the drawer where I kept the emergency contact binder Ellen had labeled 10 years ago. Inside, my original estate plan, contact for our old attorney, and a post-it Ellen had written in her perfect cursive, "If something ever feels off, trust your gut. It's never steered you wrong in surgery. Don't let it start now." That was all I needed, because now I wasn't going to ask questions anymore. I was going to get answers. And justice. You never expect the real story to be worse than your suspicions. But when you start pulling the threads, everything unravels faster than you're ready for. The day after Calvin's report landed on my kitchen table, I got a call from the Newport Marina. I almost let it go to voicemail. Instead, I answered. That choice changed everything. "Dr. Whitmore, we just need your final signature to complete the transfer of Blue Velocity. Your son mentioned you might not be able to make it in, so he offered to sign on your behalf. If you have any questions, let us know. Transfer. My yacht." I drove to the marina, heart pounding. That old surgeon's adrenaline kicking in. The woman at the front desk smiled too easily. "Your son said you were selling to simplify the estate. Everything's in order. Here's the paperwork." She slid a folder across the counter. My name, my signature, an authorizing witness, me, supposedly. But I had never seen these forms. I recognized my handwriting, but it wasn't mine. It was a careful copy, Mark's version of my signature. Close enough to pass, but not to fool me. That was the first layer, the surface. Tangible theft. A luxury boat gone. with my name erased from reality, and my own son orchestrating the sale behind my back. But there was more. Calvin came by that afternoon, his face set with that careful calm only former military men can manage. He'd been digging, he said, into the drop box Mark set up for shared family paperwork. I'd thought it was for convenience. Turns out, it was a vault for their plans. He handed me a printout of a PDF, the title in bold, Revocable Trust Plan 2022. Inside, pages and pages of forged medical memos, banking authorizations, and capacity statements, all signed, all notarized, all built to make me look like I was no longer competent. Lisa's digital fingerprints were everywhere. Draft emails between her and a legal assistant at some shady firm. Lines like, "If Dr. Whitmore is declared incapacitated, move all assets immediately." She had even copied language from Ellen's hospice records to build fake reports about my own confusion and memory loss. The notary stamp on those medical summaries was genuine, but the contents, all fiction. That was the second layer, the conspiracy. It wasn't just Mark and Lisa. There was a network, friends, digital notaries, even a complicit CPA. They'd plotted together, covering every base I thought was secure. But the third layer, the timeline sliced deepest. Calvin had tracked the plan back nearly 2 years. Not after Ellen's death, not after my stroke, but to the week Ellen's first diagnosis hit our family. It all started with a bland subject line on an email transition roadmap. In it, Lisa wrote to Mark, "We need to accelerate. Medical issues create opportunity. The window won't last forever." They used my grief as their opening. While Ellen was fighting for her life, they were assembling a legal Trojan horse in my own house. There were spreadsheets labeled Q1 transfers and discrete liquidation. My utilities were systematically moved into Lisa's name. Insurance documents altered. My digital banking profiles re-registered on her devices. And all along, Mark smiled, brought takeout, asked if I was sleeping okay. The realization was suffocating. My loss was a business strategy to them. The woman who'd been my partner for 50 years was still in hospice, and my own son was planning my financial funeral. Sitting in my study that night, surrounded by the crisp, cold smell of stamped paper and manila envelopes, it was impossible to ignore anymore. Every signature that wasn't mine, every wellness check scheduled by Lisa, every document that moved me one step closer to losing everything. It wasn't a single act. It was a machine. Slow, methodical, relentless. But here's what Mark and Lisa didn't count on. Grief may wear a man down, but it also sharpens the mind. Pressure, in the right hands, doesn't destroy, it forges. That night, I made my decision. No more waiting, no more hoping they'd do the right thing. I was done doubting myself. If they wanted a war on paper, I'd answer with a war in court. If they wanted to erase me from my own life, I'd turn every document they forged into evidence. I wasn't the victim here. Not anymore. Next came the evidence. The allies. The silent, surgical counterstrike they never saw coming. After that night, everything changed. Grief didn't vanish, but it hardened into focus. I'd spent my whole life fixing emergencies in the OR, holding the line when chaos threatened to take over. Now, I just applied that training to my own life. No shouting, no drama, only precision. First, I called Marissa Chang. She'd once been a federal prosecutor, now the top elder law attorney in Portland. She listened quietly, then asked for everything, every document, every email, every voice memo. I delivered stacks, the red folder, the fake POA, Calvin's report, the Dropbox files, the notarized medical summaries Lisa had engineered. She brought in a forensic accountant, sharp-eyed, quiet, relentless. Within days, he traced nearly every dollar, crypto transfers, consulting fees to Lisa's company, and a string of micro withdrawals that, when totaled, were nearly enough to buy a second yacht. They cataloged it all. Recordings of Lisa on Zoom, bragging to friends about managing the estate. Screenshots of Mark's texts. He won't fight it. He's too tired. Notarized logs with timestamps, signatures, digital fingerprints. Every piece, carefully labeled, built a wall of evidence that not even Mark's best defense could climb. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet. I kept watering the garden, attended church on Sundays, answered Mark's calls with the same tired, trusting tone he expected. But behind the scenes, Marissa was moving better. She filed an emergency petition to revoke Mark's POA, citing Oregon revised statutes on elder abuse. Within 48 hours, a judge issued a temporary freeze on every shared account. My house, yacht, cars, everything was flagged for injunction. Lisa tried logging into my accounts the next morning. She called, frantic, asking if I'd changed the passwords by mistake. I played dumb. Must be a computer glitch. Lisa, I'll have to check with the bank. She bought it. For a moment, by week's end, Marissa had secured a forensic IT team. They swept my devices for tampered emails, confirming that both Mark and Lisa had rerouted account recovery numbers to burner phones. That triggered a new set of legal filings. A detective from the county sheriff's office joined our case. She reviewed Calvin's timeline, the financial paper trail, and the Ring doorbell video, a silent clip of Mark leading real estate agents on a tour of my house, smiling as if he already owned it. No one said a word to me. But by the following Monday, sheriff's deputies served Mark and Lisa with restraining orders and formal notifications. All estate activity was suspended, pending investigation. The power moves were silent, but devastating. The yacht club was notified the sale of Blue Velocity was rescinded, pending fraud review. My portfolio managers froze outgoing transfers, flagged suspect withdrawals, and began clawback procedures. Lisa's wellness company was reported to the state insurance board, triggering an audit. Her business assets locked, Mark's banking privileges gone overnight. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. But I felt something close to relief. This wasn't revenge for the sake of vengeance. It was self-defense, long overdue, and absolutely necessary. When Mark called, his tone was different. Gone was the casual arrogance. In its place, "Dad, what's happening? You didn't have to do this. It's family." I didn't answer right away. I just listened, like I'd done in the past when he failed out of school, when he crashed my car, when he made excuses. But this time, the silence was intentional. "You're right, Mark," I said, finally. "Family doesn't do this. That's why I have to stop you." By the end of that week, my legal team had turned over everything to the district attorney. Fraud, elder abuse, theft by deception. Mark and Lisa went silent, and for the first time, the house didn't feel so cold. Justice wasn't finished yet, but the momentum had shifted. I was no longer on the defensive. I was moving forward, methodical, precise, and unbreakable. The day of the court hearing, Mark tried one last time to spin the story. He blamed stress, confusion, even painted himself as my protector. But the evidence spoke louder than any excuse. The judge was clear. POA revoked, assets restored, restitution ordered. Mark and Lisa faces, pale, stood as their accounts were frozen and the news cameras rolled outside the courthouse. Lisa's business license suspended. Mark barred from handling any family estate again. They looked at me, expecting some plea for reconciliation, but I'd learned my lesson. I stood up, looked Mark in the eye, and simply said, "Family is earned. You lost that." I walked out of that courtroom with my head high, dignity intact, and finally, my life back under my own name. 6 months later, the house finally sounds like life again. Morning light spills across Ellen's rose bushes, while Gloria, now a regular guest, shares coffee with 2 med students I mentor for free. The yacht, restored to my name, sits on the river, awaiting summer. Mark and Lisa, their names surface only in court invoices and cautionary articles on fiduciary fraud. I've learned something simple but fierce blood is biography. Boundaries are survival. The friends who checked my pulse during the worst nights, the neighbors who watered the garden when I couldn't stand those people, earned the word family the way surgeons earn their scars. I still keep Ellen's note on my desk. Trust your gut. Now I add a line beneath it. Enforce it. Would you have pressed charges? Or chosen a quieter path? Let me know in the comments. And if you value stories where justice lands on time, tap subscribe and set the bell, because the next tale starts the moment Blue Velocity leaves the dock under my flag.